When I was 15, my friend Carl dragged me out to the woods to show me something. We trekked for a good 30 to 40 minutes. Carl skipped most of the way, an eccentric kid. "Here we are," he announced. I looked around, but saw nothing but a few birch trees spread apart. "What?" I asked. Carl pointed to the ground, and I saw the opening of a pipe that stuck up 5 centimeters above the dirt. There were no other man-made structures anywhere near us, and, peering into the pipe, it appeared to be extremely deep. I wondered where it went, why it had been placed there at all. Carl was already unzipping his backpack. He pulled out a long spool of twine and his GoPro with a flashlight. "Let's see where it goes," he said, and I shared the excitement I saw on his face. He got all the gear strapped into a neat little bundle, flicked on the flashlight and the GoPro, and hovered them over the hole. Slowly and carefully, he unspooled the twine, lowering the setup into the pipe. "Go faster," I nagged him, but Carl knew how to make sure the footage was good. He sat over the hole, taking his time as I bellyached, picked up a stick off the ground and whacked at some weeds. After what must have been 10 minutes passed, Carl announced, "It hit the bottom," and he excitedly but measuredly began winding the thread back up. When at last the camera emerged from the hole, I crowded around behind him to take a look at the footage. I couldn't believe how long the pipe was. The deeper the camera went, it just got rustier and more coarse looking. It kept going and going and going, until finally the camera emerged from the pipe into what looked like a cave. The camera appeared to hover about 2 meters above a stone floor. There were pools of water on the ground, and the sound of dripping, and something moved in the bottom left corner of the screen. It crept into frame. It was a snake. It looked to be dark blue, but it could have just been reflecting its surroundings. A second dark blue snake appeared, seeming to slither in from the same direction off-screen. But following both snakes, an even larger object emerged. It moved like them, but it was fuzzy, hard to make out. "What is that thing?" I remember exclaiming. It looked like a ball of snakes connected by the tail, until it turned around. The most hideous woman's face I've ever seen in my life appeared on that screen. The snakes had been her hair, and her own body and neck seemed to slither like a snake as well across the stone floor. She grinned as she looked into the camera, but moved as it was lowered over her face. And as the camera was being retrieved up the pipe, she could be seen watching it, grinning from below. "What is that thing?" I got up and backed away from the pipe. Carl couldn't take his eyes off the screen and just kept replaying the last few moments. I looked down at the pipe, but hesitated to articulate what I was seeing in time. One of those blue snakes had climbed up out of it and wrapped itself around Carl's neck. It tugged on him hard, forcing him to drop the GoPro and forcing his face into the pipe. He screamed as he went. I knew he wouldn't fit down the pipe, but as he stared down its barrel, his skin started to calcify and harden. His screams sounded hollow and stopped, and there he was, over the pipe, turned completely to stone. It had only taken a couple moments. I dropped everything, turned, and ran out of the forest the way I walked in. I couldn't believe what I had just seen. I'd heard of Gorgons from Greek mythology, but I'd never thought they were real. I ran all the way back to my house, past my parents, up the stairs, into my room. I locked the door, went into my ensuite bathroom and locked that door too. I was in such a state of shock, and I kept wondering if I should have done more to help Carl. Why hadn't I warned him that the snake was coming? I had seen it, I just didn't believe what I was seeing. And was there something I could have done after he'd turned to stone? Probably not, but that guilt haunted me for a good half hour. I took a shower, thinking the warm water might calm my nerves, and it helped somewhat, but when I got out, The cold only exacerbated my trembling nerves. I sat down on the toilet with my head in my hands. I reckoned that seeing it through a camera screen was an entirely different thing to seeing it with the naked eye. How many people had seen an image of it at all and lived? Was I the only one in the world? I felt a strange, cold pressure on my inner thigh and looked down to see a snake coming up through the toilet bowl. It had started to wrap around my naked leg, and I stood up screaming, just in time before it could get a solid hold of me, and I ran and unlocked the ensuite bathroom door. There was a knock on my room door, and my mom called through it. "Are you okay in there?" Carl's mom called. "He hasn't come home yet. I was just wondering if he was in there with you." My blood went cold again, and I was frozen in place by guilt. I felt trapped on both sides and just stood there, dripping in the doorway. I felt a cold pressure snag my torso and drag me back into the bathroom. It was a second serpent that was coming out of the drain of the sink. The toilet snake was back on my trail now and had wrapped around my leg, up my torso, and all the way around my neck. The sink drain snake was slithering backwards from whence it came. The toilet snake tugged me in hard towards it, and I used the bit of momentum I had to offset myself towards the bathtub. My hand slipped to turn on the tap, and the bathtub started to fill. The toilet snake was strong, and it pulled me over towards the bowl. I kept my eyes tight shut, knowing what I might see in the drain. I locked my shoulders and elbows over the seat to stop the snake from tugging me in even further. My mother must have heard that something was up, because she was screaming now and banging on my door, struggling to get into my room. Yet, over the noise, I heard a voice in my head, as though it came whispering up through the water below. "Look at gaze upon me." I could feel my muscles tense up even more as I struggled harder to get away from the toilet bowl. I could hear the voice in the water getting closer, and as it did so, the snake around my neck's grip was slackening. "Behold my beauty," the Gorgon hissed. The grip of the snake had weakened enough that I could force myself away from the bowl and over to the bathtub, where I now gripped onto the enamel for dear life. I could hear gurgling and splashing noises as something emerged from the toilet bowl and stood behind me. With a slither of its long tail, I could hear it slam the bathroom door closed, and my mother's screaming became more distant. "I came again this way, just the least you need to do is turn." I heard the voice as though it were coming from right behind my head. Still with my eyes shut tight, I grabbed the snake around my neck and pulled her face down next to mine. Grabbing a second snake, I pulled her head down to gaze at her own reflection in the bathwater. She let out a brief scream, became petrified, and exploded into stone shrapnel.